So what you want to do is, let's say you naturally woke up at 6:30. So you're Robin. The first 30 minutes, you're kind of getting up, you're kind of getting loose. But what you want to do is the power hour is really a half hour after you naturally wake up. So that's from 7 to 8. So as much as you possibly can, sometimes this isn't realistic because you got to get kids out, but sometimes you can adjust your schedule so you adjust actually power hour. But let's say 7 to 8, that's your power hour. That's when you want to attack that most important thing. That is not email. So email is very easy to do. That's something you do when your brain's tired. Our brains, what it works like is an iPhone. So throughout the day, think about that battery charge, it gets lower and lower. So you want to use your cognitive power when it's at its highest, and that's during this power hour.
It's one small step for man.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
We choose to go to the moon, not because they are easy, but because they are
I
hard.
have a dream.
You can't handle the truth.
7,
6,
5,
4, 3,
2,
1. Super you.
Welcome back to the Super You Podcast. It's a podcast designed to unlock and unleash your inner superpower. I'm Jake with Equalman Studios. Welcome to the show. Recently, Equalman was featured on the Stacking Benjamins podcast. And now we're reposting that podcast here on the Super You Podcast. The Stacking Benjamins show was named 2023 Best Personal Finance Podcast by Bankrate.com. Hosts Joe Saul-Sehy and OG aim to make financial literacy fun as they sit around the card table in Joe's mom's half-finished basement and talk with experts about personal finance, saving, investing, and important money trends. In this episode, Erik discusses cowboy and cowgirl scheduling, making the best use of your power hour, how to say no, and the importance of thinking outward rather than inward. Thanks again for tuning in to the Super You Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode where Erik was featured on the Stacking Benjamins show.
Erik Qualman's material has been used in over 500 universities. His animation studio works with some of the world's leading brands like Disney, Oreo, Chase, and Cartier. His socialnomics work has been on 60 Minutes and has been in the Wall Street Journal, been used by the National Guard and NASA. But we're going to dive into what Erik Qualman can teach us today about focus. He focused for a year on getting much more intentional. And I'm super happy he's in Mom's basement with us. Erik Qualman's here. How are you, man?
So good. So good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am super happy you're going to help us kick off 2024. Let me ask this. You're an incredibly high performer, as we talked about in our introduction while you were coming down the stairs. What traditions do you have to kind of look back on a year and kind of set up the next year for as much success as possible?
No, for me, I love to draw out just one page with the biggest thing in the middle. And so that's always for me, family. And you got family God. Then from there, it spreads out. What are the big? So the bigger the thing you want to get done the next year, it's bigger on the sheet of paper. So if I'm going to write a book, it might just be an image of the book that I'm trying to get published. And then as I progress throughout the year on that, I color. So it's good. It's relaxing. It's adult coloring. But I basically make a one-page coloring book, so to speak, of what my vision is for the year.
You color it in as you do it. So it starts off all black and white, just images. And then as you get it done, the year goes from, it's almost like the Wizard of Oz going from black and white to color partway through.
Yeah, I love that. Black and white to color, whatever they call it. Color tech, I forgot the name. Technicolor. So it goes into Technicolor. I used to work at a movie theater, but that's a side note. But yeah, it goes into Technicolor. So that's awesome. Yeah, it just starts out black and white and it has all the big goals, the little goals, not too much on there, right? You probably have like 15, 20 items. And then you start with the big rocks first and start coloring those in.
Do you do much looking back on the year before, or is it mostly just going forward?
Yeah. It's the old adage, we get less done than we think in a year, but more done than we think in 10 years. So it's a good way to look back and go, man, sometimes I thought I was just running on that treadmill and getting nowhere. But looking back, wow, we got a lot of important stuff done, and understanding that life's not a to-do list. Like, you don't want your life to be a to-do list. That's why it's important to be intentional. And that helps me. So it might help some of your listeners out there to kind of have fun, make a crude illustration like me. Maybe you're a great drawer. I'm not.
No.
So I do the best I can. And then I'm a really good colorer, though. I can stay inside the lines.
Dude, my stick people don't even look like stick people. Like it's that bad.
Oh, there you go. I like that. I might borrow that. That's nice.
So bad I draw. Let's start off talking about getting focused, which is why I was so excited to have you join us. Did you see Wonka over the holidays?
My daughter saw it last night, so I've not seen it yet.
It is amazing. Nothing says holidays more than talking to people who make candy, right? I mean, candy and the holidays go. So I was reading in the introduction to the Focus Project. There's a convention for everything, as you know. You spoke at the National Convectioners Conference. What was that like?
Yeah, for your listeners who might not know, a lot of what I do is I'll speak usually between 50 and 60 times a year, put on a performance of an hour for, it could be for a company, it could be, in this case, it's a large audience of confectioners. And so afterwards, sometimes in a cocktail reception, and I found myself with folks that I'm meeting as like a VIP cocktail reception after the event. And literally the names of these people, their last name is all the stuff you'd find in your Halloween smorgasbord. So if you're doing trick-or-treating, like all of a sudden I'm talking, what's your name? It's like, I'm Mr. Mars. You know,
right.
then I talk
Three
to the next person, I
Musketeers
go,
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And I go, oh, wait, your last name's Mars? Like your family founded Mars? I mean, I'm Mars? They're like, yeah. And I go, oh. Then the next person I talk to, I go, oh, where do you live? Like, oh, in Hershey, Pennsylvania. I go, this is crazy. But all these people are super successful at what they do, which is they're focused on creating chocolate. And I wanted to ask them because I was struggling with focus at the time. And I was starting the process of doing my project, which then went into a book. So I have all these people in the room and you want to ask questions, right? You don't want to you already know what you're going to say. So the best thing to do is just be a sponge. So I go, hey, you're super successful. Your family's successful. What's the key to that success? They're like, you know what? Erik comes on to one thing. It's focus. I go, oh, wow. And I go, well, what do you struggle with the most? And they go, staying focused. As I went through the room, it was the same answer. And then the next week I fly to India to give a talk at Google. I start asking those two questions. What's the key to your success? Focus. What's the biggest challenge you have? Staying focused. So I go, I'm not alone. And I started talking to more and more people. So that's when I started to do the project for 2 years and then wrote the book.
But it's so hard to focus, as you know. I mean, this time of year, I've got 11, I think that's a number now, 11 things that I want to do. You've got plenty of statistics about how hard it is for us to focus.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote the book, so the Focus Project, and then I always ask myself, what did I learn? Like, what did I learn? I learned 3 things. The focus is very, 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 very difficult. It's supposed to be a 1-year project, and it took a 2-year project, but that's how hard it is. But it can become a habit. So that's the key. Focus can become a habit, just like anything else. The second thing is that people that are very successful are better at focusing than most of us. And it's not something they were born with. It's not inherent. It's just they've set up systems and processes to make sure that allows them to focus. And more times than not, that systems around saying no to small things so they can say yes to the big things. And then last but not least, this is going to strike home as we kick off the new year. This is really important to remember. Think progress, not perfection. Now, I'm not judging you because I am doing this. I'm saying it to myself. I'm talking right now, but I'm actually listening as I speak because I'm like, remind yourself. So this is what we don't want to do. We don't want to say, all right, my New Year's resolution, I'm going to get up an hour earlier because now I'm going to journal for 10 minutes. I'm going to do gratitude for 15. And then I'm going to do a little breathing exercise for 30. And then all of a sudden, it's the afternoon before you get your morning routine done. So then that's why only 7% of us adhere to our New Year's resolutions because we set ourselves up for failure. So what you want to do is just get 1% better. 1% better. How can I get better? And like you just mentioned, Joe, you have 14 things on your list. Some people out there have 100. What's the one thing that you want to do today? What's the one thing, if you do it well, it makes all those other 100 things easier or unnecessary? And so break it down to the bite-sized chunks. And a lot of you know that it's just inherent that the gravitational pull pulls us to try to do everything at once. And it's really just, let's focus on the big, not the busy.
To do that, you decide that you're going to, because you never do anything small, Erik. I mean, we could go through all the different things that you've done, but you decide, I'm going to focus on one area of focus every month for a year. Initially, even this was a struggle, right? I mean, you write that in December, you tried to start doing this, and even trying to get focused, it was hard to get focused on getting focused.
Yeah, it's crazy because, and a lot of you will be able to identify with this because we're similar. All of us are living the same movie. We're just different actors within that movie. And so I go, all right, I'd basically lay awake at night. I go, man, how cool would it be if all I had to worry about is I didn't have to worry about an animation project. I didn't have to worry about writing the script to be on stage. I didn't have to worry about writing my next book. What if I just worried about cleaning the house or organize all this stuff in the house? How great would that be? How great would the house be organized? So I go, let's do this just a month. Let's start off with 2 hours a day and focus on something. Then I go, well, that's kind of crazy. That's not working because I tried 5 times. It didn't work. So I go, let's just break it down to a half hour a day. And most of you out there, you're going to focus on the one thing you have to do to have the luxury to do what I did, which was do this for a year. So I go, I've got to hit our sales number at the beginning of the year. And that's something I can measure. So let's see if this focus stuff even works. And so what I primarily do, as I mentioned, was I speak on stage. So I perform on stage. So we got to get booked to be on stage. So people think, do we want Erik Qualman? Do we want Malcolm Gladwell? Do we want Brene Brown? Do we want, Simon Sinek? There's a lot of competition. So we've got to get booked to be on stage. So our first month was, all right, I'm just going to dedicate a half hour a day to work on sales. Because historically, people call us or email us and say, hey, are you available for these dates? We never proactively reach out.
Yeah.
So what if we proactively reached out? Like, that's a good fit. Let's reach out to M&M Mars and get that. So to shorten this story up, it's like half hour a day. And then all of a sudden, 5 times, I did 18 minutes the first month. Not 18 minutes for a day, 18 minutes for the entire month. And that's how hard focus is. But on the 5th time, it finally clicked. We were able to do the half hour. And then it also allowed me to measure something. That's why we picked sales as well. Because I got to see if it didn't work, we just wouldn't have a book, we wouldn't have a project. But the end of the story is that we had a record amount of sales, not only for that month, but we achieved our sales for the year within that month, just by that simple thing of focusing for a half hour a day on being intentional with that outreach. And so very powerful stuff when you're able to focus, because you think about a magnifying glass. It's not very powerful when you're moving around all these different things, but when you hold it steady on a fixed point, all of a sudden that can burn through a wall. That small magnifying glass, using the power of that sun, can burn through that leaf or burn through a wall if you keep it focused.
It's funny. I had a similar experience. I get coaching from a group called Strategic Coach, and we were talking about looking back at the last decade of your life and what are the big things that you did. And it was always those times when I finally, Erik, got rid of all the stuff, all the noise, and focused on things that the big rocks move. Like, I totally had to do. And yet, to your point, there's so much stuff that comes at us every day that it's very difficult to get there. I want to talk about some of the big eureka moments you had from this. And then I want to ask you about the first couple months and really how you picked the things to focus on and what your results were. Your first eureka moment, you write, focusing today is hard, really hard, but it can be learned. Like, it can be learned to focus. So how did you go from 18 minutes in that full month to the next month setting sales records? Like, what did you learn to be able to finally carve out that time?
Carve out's a good word. We call it cowboy and cowgirl scheduling. What I learned was, hey, at the 5th failure, I go, why am I repeating what I'm trying to do? What am I doing for the last 10 years? I'm doing the same thing. So I've got to, break it up. And so what I was doing was basically letting life happen to me rather than attacking life. I was letting life attack me, meaning that I'd get up and I'd probably answer email because it showed me that dopamine hit of I have 100 email, I get it down to 0. That feels pretty good, but maybe that's not the number one thing I should be doing. So instead, what I do is I'd carve out cowboy and cowgirl scheduling. So if you know that song by the Chicks, it's like wide open spaces. So if you think about a cowboy or a cowgirl, there's a lot of things that are fenced off, but then there's also wide open spaces. So on your schedule, you want to fence off specific times for sales. So I'd fence off half hour a day within that when I first woke up, when my brain's at its optimum point. And so focus on the most important thing first. And then I get that half hour done. If I can get back to sales later, great. If not, I'm already playing with house money because I nailed off that 30 minutes. And so that's what cowboy and cowgirl scheduling looks like, is you block off certain times for certain things and then also leave wide open space. And that's hard to do because if you look at Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, they're good friends. And when they first kind of connected and were going over, they were getting interviewed by, I think, Charlie Rose. And they looked at each one's calendar. They're exact opposites. Gates thought was that as a good CEO, your schedule should be completely full with meetings. And then you look at Warren's, it's just like this flip through piece of paper. He had like 5 meetings for the whole month. And the answer is in the middle there. And so it's really interesting and fascinating to see that Gates had no wide open spaces. And so it's really cowboy, cowgirl, guys, fence off time for the important things, usually in the morning. And maybe we'll get into the power hour here in a second because it's fun for listeners to kind of guess what they are. But yeah, it's being intentional. That was the difference. I go, okay, I haven't been intentional. I'd wake up and go, yeah, I should get to that half hour sales. But once I flipped it and said, I got to be intentional. And then I had it written down the night before, and then I'd check that box off. I did that 30 minutes, but I'd also have it hard fast on that calendar.
When you cowboy car girl scheduling right at the beginning of the day too, I feel like A, you're more likely to do it because your head's not full of all the other stuff. But then B, when you talked about playing with the house's money, if you've already done it, and you're probably more enthused to try to get back to it, I would imagine, later in the day, because I don't know, if you carve out time for the things that are fun, Erik, at the beginning of the day, like your brain then is focused there. You must have found that time became available as the day went on.
Yeah, exactly. Attack the day before it attacks you. But all of us can relate to this. In school, it turns out our parents are pretty smart. They'd go, hey, why don't you study on Friday? Or why don't you get that term paper done on Friday? Because even though you don't think you're thinking about that term paper, if you haven't done it and you know it has to be due by Monday, your brain's thinking about it. You don't realize that, but it actually is thinking about that kind of storm cloud in the back of your head. So it's freeing when you do this. And it's key to do it in the morning. We'll get into what time you do it here in a second.
Yeah.
But you want to attack the day before it attacks you. So here's a question for all of you listeners out there.
This is hold on, because even to preview this, Erik, the second takeaway, which I think what you're about to say is going to espouse your second big eureka, which is systems, processes, and routines trump willpower. And I think this idea of your power hour is a big piece of this. If you just set the system, the process, and the routine up, you don't have to worry about, do I have the will to do it? But tell us about the time of day.
Yeah, exactly. Willpower is kind of worthless. So it's really about systems and processes. And so all you listeners out there, I want you to think about, if it's a Saturday morning, your kids aren't waking up, there's no alarms. This sounds like a glorious dream, I know. But let's just go with it that it's Saturday, nothing's going to wait. No dog next door is waking up. You're just going to get up whenever you feel like you're getting up. Think about when you naturally just get up. Like wake up. Not necessarily get out of bed, but you like wake up. All right, so that's your natural inclination. Before 7 is a robin. Then you're an eagle, 7 to 10. Most people are eagles. And then very few people, it's about 10% are owls, but creative people generally fall into the owl. They wake up after 10 a.m. So what you want to do is, let's say you naturally woke up at 6:30. So you're robin. The first 30 minutes, you're kind of getting up, you're kind of getting loose. But what you want to do is, the power hour is really a half hour after you naturally wake up. So that's from 7 to 8. So as much as you possibly can, sometimes this isn't realistic because you got to get kids out, but sometimes you can adjust your schedule so you adjust actually power hour. But let's say 7 to 8, that's your power hour. That's when you want to attack that most important thing. That is not email. So email is very easy to do. That's something you do when your brain's tired. So most of our brains, what it works like is an iPhone. So throughout the day, think about that battery charge. It gets lower and lower. So you want to use your cognitive power when it's at its highest, and that's during this power hour. So that's also what you want to carve it out when that power hour. So if you're an owl, that might be you actually get up at 10:30, then your power hour is 11 to 12. So just figure out when that works best for you, but that is your power hour. Do not waste it on stuff that you can do when your brain's tired.
And once again, have that fencing out of that time immediately, I would think.
Yeah, exactly. Fence that off. Fence off that time for your power hour. And it could be a power half hour. I mean, be realistic. If you just do 1 minute more a day, that's progress. So it's just getting better. So it's not just saying you got to do 5 hours. It's like, just do better. That's it.
We do. We start off the year, I think, way too far over our skis. Like we go, oh, I'm going to be miraculously different tomorrow instead of just incrementally a little bit. And then 2 weeks later, we're doing nothing. It's like all the people that show up at the gym for a week. Your third eureka moment. This is going to be a huge one, Stackers. Letting something go is sometimes the best way to complete it. You right. Letting go. Erik, that's so hard.
It is so hard, but letting go. So let's say you're a business. You want to get on all social media accounts. But then you know that the biggest drivers are Facebook and LinkedIn. Let's just argue that. But in your mind, you've got on your list, all right, we got to get an account on TikTok, let's say. And that sits there for month after month. And you go, you know what? It's probably not going to happen. Let's let it go. It's done. There we go. I let it go. That one's gone. A lot of people, especially in America, they think that's like defeatist. No, it's being smart. It's using your limited resources. It's essentially a good analogy, and we might get into how to say no. Let's get into that. Actually, it's really helpful. So you've got to learn how to say no. It's really hard. I'm a people pleaser. Most of you out there are people pleasers. Normally that serves us well. It serves us for thousands of years. That's how we assimilate in a tribe. But when you say yes to everyone, you're saying no to everyone. So this is the way I am able to do it. Because before I'd say yes to everyone and sometimes just half-ass something. So then everyone loses. But if you just say a definitive, sharp no at the beginning, like, hey, I'd love to help out on XYZ, but I'm already booked that day. Sorry. And they're like, that allows them to move on and ask somebody else. And it's really getting those systems of saying no in place. So I have a copy and paste email that's really just like, hey, this is a great opportunity. Really appreciate you reaching out to me, but I'm actually heads down on my next book, so I'm going to have to pass. Best of luck. And it's hard to do that. But as you start to get better at it, then you learn, wait, if I say yes to everyone, I'm saying no to everyone. Or if I'm really struggling with saying no, I go, you got to think about it like a surgeon. So if you're a surgeon, you're only allowed to operate a certain amount of hours a week, because then you become detrimental to the patient and yourself when you're tired. So you've got to remember you have a limited inventory of yes, you have a limited inventory of energy. So not time management, but energy management. So if you're a surgeon, there's laws in place to protect you and protect the patient. So you got to think about yourself like a surgeon. Yes, you'd love to operate on everyone and save everyone's life. But if you start to do that, you become detrimental to the patient. And so that's why you got to remember, it's all about saying no when you have to. Say no to the little things so you can say yes to the big ones.
You have, Erik, a story that really resonated with me about saying no. It's Christmas morning, and there is a client, and you are furiously at 2 a.m. writing this email to this client. And man, as a people pleaser, I've been there before, and you don't want to say no to anything. You don't want to say no to any business. And I know there's people out there that have these people in their life that are just, they're sucking the freaking life out of you. And it seems like in this story, this client is sucking the life out of you, Erik. Do you mind telling us that story? Because this is the kind of thing that we should immediately say no to right now. And we don't, because we think we're going to miss out on money.
No, you're right.
Yes.
So you're exactly right. We're working with a client. Their busy time of year is the holidays because they sell watches. It's a big brand, most of you know. And we were helping them with something with the digital side of things. And I thought I wanted to run an agency as well. That everyone's like, you should run an agency. You should run an agency like Gary Vaynerchuk, like Gary V. You should run an agency. And clients, after I spoke, would come up and go, hey, we want you to run our social. And I'm like, I don't do that. And finally, I'm like, well, let's just try it out. Because I asked my team, I go, you guys want to do that? Yeah, we should do that. All right. I go, I'm not going to be able to help you much. So you're going to have to run it. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. And long story short, things weren't going well. And we were beating the numbers, but they weren't happy. So and the contract had said that it's going to be rough the first 3 months. Just like when you work out, you're not going to see anything for the first 3 months. So if you work out that day and look in the mirror, you're like, where are the abs? It's like, no, you got to stay with the process. And the contract specifically says you're going to get frustrated in the first 2-3 months because this is how it works, but you got to see the process through. That's why you cannot break this contract for 12 months because otherwise we're both going to lose. But yeah, I've started getting these calls on Christmas Eve, and then I'm getting these emails, and I wake up and I get this.
You wrote that it was 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve. That is BS.
Christmas Eve. And I'm up. I had to do ping pong table. I had to put all this kid stuff together. And so at 2 a.m, I'm like up with the email trying to respond to this because it says kill the contract in the subject line. And literally, they're not allowed to kill the contract, just like I mentioned. It's just legally binding. But I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden I hear some pitter patter from the feet upstairs. And I had some stuff still out because I was putting it together while I was answering this email. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was able to kind of avoid my daughter seeing anything. And then literally that just was a moment of focus for me. I go, you know what? If you guys want to get out of this, we're beating the numbers and this is a process. You're supposed to see it through, but let's just, you're out of the contract. That's fine. And then we decided we're not doing any of that kind of ad work, that's not the thing that we like. That's not what we should be focused on. And so, there's a lot of missed revenue there, but then we made a lot more revenue on the other stuff that we're really good at and really want to do. And so that was just an aha moment for me. It's like, nope, we're not doing that. I'm not enjoying that.
It's funny how 30 seconds after the email, because I've had to write some of those emails before too, where writing it just seems, Erik, like the most painful thing in the world. But I'm thinking about a similar email I had to write. And 30 seconds after I wrote it, I felt so damn good. You must have felt great.
Yeah, it's liberating. Like, gosh, that's fine. Like, okay, that's perfect. We got to move on. It's like, no, we're not going to do that. And then sometimes proactive before we even get into that. Like if there's an event and I go, this is what we do. This is how it works. They're like, no, we want to do this, this, and this. I go, hey, we're not a real good fit. But I can recommend 3 people that are, because we own an animation studio. So we're like, this is the way our process works. We've honed it down over 10 years. It's going to really help you because we've learned it helps with our partners, and it's going to really help us. It's a win-win. but it's really different. But that's why you want to hire us, because it is different. You're going to get a different product. It's going to be really good, this piece of animation. But you have to see the process through. And then they'll say, well, we want this or this and this. And then we go, yeah, perfect. We're not a good fit. I've got 3 people I'd love to recommend for you. Now, sometimes, more often than not, what happens is they'll go, oh, yeah, we really want you. We'll do that. We want that process. And so it's funny that it works out better when you do it that way, when you set those parameters and set that focus, because that's what you have to do with partners sometimes, is actually help them focus. Because I've been on the other side as well. I've been the client. I've been the partner. And so I know what the challenges are at a big corporation. And so it's really like set those parameters and everybody wins.
The first month, you say focus on something different every month. The first month, you focus on building your business. I get that, because you want to make sure that the business is going to run while you're focusing on all these other things. What did you focus on in month number 2?
Oh, man, did I get excited. So the first one was daunting because you're like, sales, man, if this doesn't work, I don't know what we're going to do from a business standpoint, or this book's not going to happen. This project's just not happening, because that's measurable. So like you come off of that, the wind's behind you, you're like getting organized. How good does that feel? Because you can see it, right? If it's whether it's digital organization or whether it's especially physical organization, people clean because it allows them to see that momentum, right? We want to see that we're growing. That's the biggest key to fulfillment. So if you want to feel joy and feel fulfilled, it's about, are you progressing? And that's why organization, a lot of people do it sometimes too much, but that's why people do it, because they can see that accomplishment. Oh gosh, this room's a mess. And now look how organized it is. Everything's, look at this fridge. It's so clean. Everything's, all the labels, they're outward facing. You know, I forgot there's a name for it, but it's when all the labels, like my wife's like, you're crazy. Like every label has to be turned and face. I think they call it facing. So it's called facing, where you have so think about that. If you're one of me, send me an email, Equalman@Equalman. Go, I love having my fridge so organized that, all the labels need to be turned and facing the same way. And then now people are thinking I'm crazy. No, I love that when it's just super organized.
But it's great because those two things, the business has to run, and then with everything organized, you can focus on the rest of it. So this is very specific to you. I want to ask you a question. Making something a reality. If you have an idea or a goal, you're 10% likely to get it. You write. When you decide that you're going to do it, that goes up to 25%. When you decide when you're going to do it, you double it again, it goes up to 50%. When you commit to someone else, you will do it. It goes up to 65. And when you schedule accountability check-ins with those people, 95%. Now, when you talk about scheduling accountability, I would imagine that accountability is better if it's somebody who's in that arena, or is it just an interested friend? Is it a mentor? Like, who am I checking in with?
Just anybody. Could be an interested friend. Some people have their own advisory boards that they set up for themselves. Like they have 5 people for the year. And I've got that on my to-do list. I've never done it, but a lot of people we interviewed for the book that are successful, that's what they do. They kind of set up a mini board and go, then they show them that mind map at the beginning of the year and go, hey, I want you to kind of hold me accountable to these 5 things and give me advice, just like an active board would do at a company. So it's really being intentional with your life, because how we live our days is how we live our life. And I know everything I'm saying is pretty simple, but it's not easy. Like what you just said, if I write it down and if I tell someone, and then if I have a lunch scheduled with that person that I told, oh my gosh, I haven't done anything and I'm about to have that lunch. Guess what I'm doing that morning? Furiously, I told them I'm going to write this new book. I'm furiously writing a couple of pages because they're going to ask me, how's the book coming? And so that's the key, is really, when I say it's simple, not easy, that's why you've got to do that. Now, the question is, well, why don't people do that? Mainly because they don't want to fail. So if they don't tell anyone, in their mind, they can't really fail per se. Let's say that you want to be the world's greatest singer. You want to be the next Taylor Swift. And you sing in the shower, but you never actually go out and sing anywhere. So you never failed, but it's impossible for you to become the next Taylor Swift because you never put yourself out there. So that's why some people do that, because they can always say in their mind, even if they're 90, hey, I can be the next Taylor Swift because I haven't failed, because I haven't done it. But you've automatically failed because you haven't done it. The key is telling people, sharing it with you, and what you'll find is they're going to be there supporting you, and they'll be there checking in and reminding you, hey, how's the book coming? How's the book coming? Every time you see them. And so you know you're going to see them, or sometimes you have specific lunches that are check-in meetings. Go, hey, I just want you to, when we have that lunch, the first thing I want you to ask me is, how's your screenplay coming? because that's going to remind me as I look at the calendar 3 days out, I go, oh gosh, I haven't done anything for that. And that's the first question they're going to ask me.
I want to end on, I think, something that may be one of the most important parts of this project. In month number 3, you go right to family, which I think a lot of people, when they're getting focused, we think about work, maybe because we're money nerds on this show, we get focused about our money, but we don't necessarily focus on family. What really happened during that 3rd month when you prioritized that so far up this list, Erik?
Made everything else seem so small. When I get stressed out about stuff, it's because I'm thinking inward versus outward. And that's true for most of us. And so when that stress starts to close in on us, it's because we're thinking just inward, meaning about ourselves, and not outward about other people. And so when you think about, start thinking about outward with your family, then it puts everything in perspective. You start to realize that no one's going to remember that you worked those extra hours. No one's going to remember that you crushed it at the office. But your kids and your family are going to remember when you're not there. That's what they're going to remember 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And so reverting back to the Christmas story we talked about, that would have been disastrous memory for my daughter if she'd have been able to make it downstairs. And so it's really about understanding the long game. And so with family, that really allows you to understand you've got to play the long game. So I always say, be persistent in the short term, but patient in the long term. Persistent in the short term, patient in the long term.
And there's the time that you cowboy schedule right there, everybody. Cowboy that off, because I always find that before I did that, that's the time that got away from me.
Yeah, because you think it's the easiest thing to move.
Yeah, I'll get to it later.
Yeah, hey, can you reschedule to that meeting to 5? Very few of us will say, no, I'm coaching my girls' basketball game, sorry. Well, this might be a good way to end it on. So first of all, I struggle with this to this day with focus. So here I did a 2-year project. I wrote the book. I continue to go back to the book because there's institutional research and also street science, me actually testing this stuff. Because the gravitational pull is always to kind of fall back into our bad habits. And so when the world gets wild and crazy, especially certain times of year, I go, whoa. Let's go back in. Let's deep dive on that and try to figure out what that looks like. So I coached my girls' basketball team, and we'd gotten in the championship.
Hey,
but it was great. I know that I'd booked an event the day after that because I'm like, you know what? They'll just guarantee we're in the championship because now I'm in a tough situation. So contractually, I need to fly in the day before to be there. And then the game would not allow for that to happen. So I'm going, oh my gosh, what do I do? Do I just have the assistant coach it? But that's going to send the wrong message to the girls that, when you need me most, I'm out the door. I got to go to this business thing. I talk to my parents. They go, what are you going to remember 10 years from now? I go, coaching the game, or if they lose and I wasn't there, I'll feel like I let them down. If we lose when I'm there, at least I was there. And so I go, I'm going to roll the dice. I'm going to get on that, book 3 flights the following morning at like 5:30 in the morning. Fortunately, it's an afternoon event. So I'm like, okay, I've got 3 ways to get there, book 3 flights. The good news, we start off the game terrible, and I'm sitting on the sideline going, did I just stay here for this? But then the girls came back. It was a great comeback. We won the game by 1 point.
Wow.
It was the right decision. Oh my gosh, win, lose, or draw is the right decision. And then next morning, first flight's canceled. But fortunately, that second flight, away we went, and it all worked out. And it was just easy to look back and go, man, those parents get smart with the years, don't they? They get smarter with the years.
Isn't that wild? I felt like when I was 16, maybe 15, my parents started losing brain cells. It had nothing to do with me, Erik. My parents totally, I don't know how they got dumber. Like they just got dumber. And maybe about 2021, they started something. Maybe they started eating their Wheaties or carrots or something, but those brain cells started coming back. It was so strange.
It's wild. It's wild how that works.
The book is The Focus Project, The Not So Simple Art of Doing Less. It's available everywhere. Erik, thank you so much for mentoring us here at the start of 2024. If people need your message at their next business keynote, by the way, we'll also link to your website on our show notes page at stackingbenjamins.com.
I love doing this because it reminds me to get back on track as well. So thanks again for listening to today's Super You podcast. Again, it's the podcast designed to unlock and unleash your inner superpower. And if you want to pay it forward, make sure you go post a review
for the Super You podcast, because what that will do, it'll allow others that aren't familiar with our podcast to discover it. And hopefully that allows them to unlock and unleash their inner superpower. So that's it for today's show. I'm your host, Equalman, reminding all of us it's not what we take from the world, it is what we leave behind.